Elena's fingers trembled around her coffee mug as Marcus's words echoed in the kitchen like a death sentence. The morning sunlight streaming through their bay window suddenly felt harsh against her skin. "You're selling my car?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the refrigerator. Marcus didn't even look up from his phone, scrolling through what she now realized were probably messages from her. Cassandra, the 25-year-old marketing assistant who had somehow become the center of his universe. "It's not really your car, Elena. It's in my name. Besides, Cassie needs reliable transportation, and you barely drive anymore." The 1967 Mustang convertible sat in their driveway, like a faithful friend waiting for better weather. Elena's father had restored it himself, spending countless weekends in their old garage, his calloused hands gentle against the cherry-red paint. He'd given it to her on her 18th birthday, 3 months before the cancer took him. "That car." Elena's voice cracked. She cleared her throat, forcing steel into her words. "That car was my father's." Was being the operative term, Marcus said, finally glancing up with those cold blue eyes that once made her heart flutter. Now they just made her feel small. "He's been gone for 20 years, Elena. It's time to let go of the past." The kitchen fell silent except for the tick of the antique clock her grandmother had left her, another relic Marcus had been eyeing lately. Elena studied her husband's face, searching for any trace of the man who used to bring her wildflowers from their garden, who used to dance with her in this very kitchen while dinner burned on the stove. That man had vanished somewhere between his promotion to regional manager and his first business trip to Portland, where he'd met Cassandra. "I won't let you sell it," Elena said quietly. Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "You don't really have a choice. I've already posted the ad. Guy's coming to look at it this afternoon." Elena's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering against the tile floor in an explosion of ceramic and dark liquid. She stared at the mess, watching the coffee seep into the grout lines like spreading ink. 43 years old, and she felt as broken as the mug at her feet. "Clean that up," Marcus said, returning to his phone. "I don't want Cassie to see the house looking like a disaster when she comes by later." When she comes by later. The casual cruelty of it stole Elena's breath. This was her home, their home, and he was bringing his girlfriend here like she didn't exist. Like their 15-year marriage was nothing more than an inconvenience to be swept away with the coffee and ceramic shards. Elena knelt to collect the pieces, her mind racing. The largest shard reflected her face. Brown eyes that had lost their spark, prematurely silver hair that she'd stopped coloring months ago, skin that bore the lines of too many sleepless nights wondering where her marriage had gone wrong. As she worked, a memory surfaced unbidden. Her father's voice, rough with emotion as he handed her the Mustang's keys. "This car's got heart, Mija. Just like you. Don't ever let anyone convince you to give up what matters." Elena closed her eyes, the ceramic shard cold against her palm. Maybe it was time to remember what mattered. The potential buyer arrived at 3 o'clock sharp, just as Marcus had promised. Elena watched from the living room window as a middle-aged man in a worn baseball cap walked around the Mustang, his hands reverent as they traced the perfect curves of the fenders. "That's him," Marcus said, adjusting his tie like he was heading to a board meeting instead of destroying his wife's last connection to her father. "Tom Bradley. He collects classics. Cash buyer." Elena's chest tightened. She could see it in the man's eyes, the same look her father used to get around beautiful cars. Tom Bradley would love the Mustang the way it deserved to be loved. But that only made this betrayal cut deeper. "The paperwork's on the kitchen counter," Marcus continued, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror. "Once he pays, you can clean out whatever junk you've got in there." "Junk?" Elena bit back the urge to scream. The junk was a roadside emergency kit her father had assembled, a fuzzy dice charm from their honeymoon in Vegas, and a small wooden box that had belonged to her mother. Items that might mean nothing to Marcus but contained pieces of her soul. As Marcus headed outside, Elena slipped upstairs to their bedroom. From the back of her closet, behind winter coats that smelled of cedar and regret, she retrieved a shoebox. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was the wooden box from the Mustang. Intricate mahogany with brass hinges, about the size of a jewelry box. Her mother had kept it on the dashboard of every car she'd ever owned. Elena's fingers traced the carved roses on the lid, remembering how her mother used to say it brought good luck on long journeys. After the accident, when Elena was just 16, her father had placed it in the Mustang. She'd wanted to keep traveling, he'd said through his tears. Now Elena opened the box with trembling hands. Inside lay her secret, something she'd hidden from Marcus for months, something she'd been too afraid to face herself. The pregnancy test, with its 2 pink lines, seemed to glow in the afternoon light filtering through the bedroom window. At 43, after 15 years of trying, of fertility treatments and crushed hopes, of Marcus eventually declaring he didn't want children anyway, Elena had finally conceived. The irony was devastating. New life growing inside her, just as her marriage crumbled to dust. She'd discovered it 3 weeks ago, the same day she'd found Cassandra's earrings in Marcus's car. The same day she'd realized her husband was not just having an affair, but planning to leave her for a woman young enough to be his daughter. A woman who, according to the text messages Elena had accidentally seen, was already talking about the babies they'd have together. From downstairs, she could hear Marcus's fake laugh, the sound he made when he was trying to close a deal. Elena closed the box and held it against her chest, feeling the weight of all her secrets, all her silent suffering. She thought about the divorce papers hidden in her desk drawer, papers she'd been too terrified to serve. She thought about the prenup Marcus had insisted on, the one that would leave her with almost nothing. She thought about starting over at 43, alone and pregnant, while he got to keep everything they'd built together. But as she looked at the mahogany box, she remembered something else her mother used to say. Sometimes the smallest gifts carry the greatest power. Elena smiled for the first time in months. Perhaps it was time Marcus learned that lesson. The handshake between Marcus and Tom Bradley was firm, sealing a deal that felt like a funeral to Elena. She watched from the porch as her husband pocketed the cash, $15,000 for a car that had been priceless to her. "Pleasure doing business," Tom said, genuine warmth in his voice. "She's a beauty. I'll take good care of her." Elena believed him. In another life, she might have been happy knowing the Mustang would be cherished. But in this life, watching her last piece of her father drive away felt like losing him all over again. Marcus bounded up the porch steps, counting bills with the enthusiasm of a man who'd just solved all his problems. "Cassie's going to love her new car," he said, not even pretending anymore. "We're thinking about getting a place together. Somewhere fresh, you know." "I know exactly what you mean," Elena said quietly. She held out the mahogany box, wrapped now in brown paper and tied with twine. "This is for you." Marcus paused, suspicion flickering across his features. In the 15 years they'd been married, Elena had never been one for surprises or grand gestures. She was the steady one, the reliable one, the one who made his life comfortable while he took all the credit. "What is it?" he asked, taking the package. "Something I found in the car. I thought you should have it before." Elena's voice caught, but this time it wasn't from sadness. It was from barely contained anticipation. "Before you start your new life." Marcus tore at the paper with the greed of a child on Christmas morning. When he opened the mahogany box, his face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and finally, shock so profound it drained all color from his cheeks. "Elena," he whispered, staring at the pregnancy test. "Is this real?" "Yes." Elena's voice was steady now, strong. 3 weeks along. "Funny timing, don't you think?" Marcus looked up at her, and for the first time in months, she had his complete attention. She could see his mind racing, calculating, trying to figure out how this changed his carefully laid plans. "But you can't. We tried for years." "Apparently, stress and a failing marriage were bad for my fertility," Elena said with a bitter smile. Who knew? The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Elena watched as the reality settled over Marcus. The reality of child support, of legal complications, of explaining to his young girlfriend that his barren wife was suddenly, impossibly pregnant. "You planned this," he said finally, his voice hollow. Elena laughed, a sound that surprised them both with its brightness. "Marcus, I planned nothing. This baby is as much a shock to me as it is to you. But unlike you, I'm not running from it." She pulled the divorce papers from her purse, not the ones hidden in her desk, but new ones, filed that morning while he was busy selling her past to fund his future. "I'm keeping the baby," she said, handing him the papers. "You can keep Cassandra and your midlife crisis. But the house, the business assets, the retirement funds. Those are about to become a lot more complicated to divide. Marcus stared at the papers, his hands shaking. Elena, we can work this out. We can. We can't, she said firmly. You sold the last piece of my father I had left. You brought your girlfriend into our home. You threw away 15 years like they meant nothing. She touched her still flat stomach gently. But you also gave me the greatest gift, even if you didn't mean to. As if summoned by the chaos, Cassandra's car pulled into the driveway, a sensible sedan that would never turn heads the way the Mustang had. The young woman stepped out, her face bright with excitement, probably expecting to see her new car. Instead, she found Marcus on the porch, looking like a man who'd just realized he'd sold his soul and couldn't buy it back. Elena picked up the empty mahogany box, holding it like a talisman. Her mother had been right. Sometimes the smallest gifts carried the greatest power. This little box had held her secret, her strength, her future. And now, finally, it held her freedom. Enjoy your new life, Marcus, Elena said, walking toward the house. I know I'm going to enjoy mine. Behind her, she heard Cassandra's confused voice asking where the car was, asking why Marcus looked like he'd seen a ghost. Elena didn't turn around. She had a baby to prepare for, a new life to build, and a father's memory to honor in ways that transcended any car. The mahogany box sat on her kitchen counter, empty now, but somehow more meaningful than ever. Soon, it would hold new treasures, ultrasound photos, tiny booties, all the beautiful debris of a life she'd thought was impossible. Elena smiled, resting her hand on her stomach. Sometimes the best journeys began when you thought you'd reached the end of the road. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel and enjoy these other amazing stories.